Another day, another unboxing video. I'm actually very excited for this one because this has been on my wish list for a while and it hit the deal of the day, so I couldn't think of a better time to buy it than when it's for roughly half off. Alright, best way to approach this. Now I will say there are not many direct replicas out there of this particular type of sword, although there are plenty of places that you could go to get one made. That's going to be somewhat vague until I open this. Alright. So this will be the scabbard. This is a windlass product. Oh look, there's actually detail on this scabbard. That's a first. Not really, but usually these are more cheap. Of course, this is going to be the same quality of actual craftsmanship. A little bit more detail on the scabbard, so that's kind of nice. And here is the sword. Find a good way to open it. There we go. So, this is the Ulfbert sword. Ulfbert, which I said wrong just a second ago. For museum replicas, probably the biggest thing to note is that if you have ever watched documentaries about these swords, this would actually be a fake version, just by the way it's got the kind of the fake etching in it. Usually it's ULFBERH, then the plus sign, then the T, as it were, the cross and then the T. And so it's actually very common to see what was essentially knockoff Ulfberts made that got the spelling order wrong. And so this is actually one. I think it's somewhat fitting because, of course, this is a museum replica sword, so they're not the greatest thing ever. It is a blunt edge. I didn't bother having them do the sharpening service. And it's all very, very simple in design. Good Brazil nut pommel and a very, very, very basic cross. Actually, probably one of the most basic cross guards I've seen on a windlass sword. And the fake inlay is just kind of printed on there. This time I brought a rag that I can actually wipe off some of the grease with. So I'm going to do that real quick. But overall, it's a fairly cheap but at least somewhat decent replica of a Viking sword. Of course, all the standard windlass stuff does apply. It's got a actually got a very nice peen for windlass product. And so it is functional and usable, much more so if I actually sharpen it. Has the same problem as a lot of the other museum replica Viking swords, where they take what is essentially a rigid broadsword and they add the fuller end to widen the blade. And it ends up with this little bit of a ridge near the tip instead of what should be there, which is actually the spatulated tip. Should not be a ridge in those tips, but this is not an expensive replica of a sword. This is not going to be the highest quality anyway. And all the standard windlass stuff applies, and all of the Viking sword stuff applies. So this is light enough, but it's also very blade heavy, just because it's a Viking sword. Fits really well in the hand, I have to say. The grip is about the right size for my hand. Any smaller, and I probably wouldn't be able to hold it very comfortably. So yeah, overall this is one that's been on my list just because I wanted a sword that said Ulfbert. I would much rather obviously have a very real one, and in the future maybe I'll have someone make me one, who find someone who's a really good smith. Another option would be if I ever get very good at doing this type of thing myself, maybe I'd make my own. But this will suffice in the meantime to have an Ulfbert replica in my collection. So there you have it. Pretty decent first impressions, winless product. It was definitely worth the 50% off, I will say that much. Brief addendum, because normally I just give you my initial thoughts and then move on with everything. However, normally I really rail against museum replicas for their scabbard, and while certainly the quality is still not the highest, I have to say that it fits very nice with this sword. In fact, I have resistance putting it in because of the way they've done the throat of the scabbard, and it holds the sword very well. I'm actually pretty impressed. It takes a little bit of shaking to actually make it begin to come out. So there you go. It still kind of rattles in there, but at least it stays, which is a lot more than can be said for other museum replica swords. So there you go. Kind of a nice thing.